starting with an appetizer. The donut cooked up an appetizer. And we will, after the reading of her paper, discuss this as we did yesterday, and then take a break. And then after the break, we'll have a discussion about some other things that I won't go into now. So we'll work till about 12:30, depending on how it goes this morning. I don't have to introduce Anne. Many of you have already read her book or heard her speak, and I'm sure you are all waiting to hear what she has to say.
Well, today actually what we'll do in a sense is go over what we talked about yesterday, because we really pretty well covered the main points yesterday, but perhaps we can profit from coming at some of the issues again from maybe a little bit different perspective. By the way, I left the funny papers there, the comics, because Mama has a strip on fantasies today that seems to be relevant to our discussion yesterday. I thought to call the presentation this morning the 4 W's of Rebirth. Now, who can recite for us the 4 W's of metapsychiatry as Dr. Hora has formulated them? What are the 4 questions in the 4 W's? Who knows? Who am I? Where am I? What am I? And what is my purpose? Good.
Some people don't know the answers to that.
Some people, well, we won't answer those right now. But I wanted to ask those questions about being born again, which is what we're considering. Who am I? That is the me that needs to be reborn. What and where will I be when I am reborn? And what is my motivation for wanting to be reborn? Now, I have 3 quotes to start with, and the first is from a book called Horton Hears a Who by Dr. Seuss. How many? Start with the what? The heavy stuff, right? That great philosophical tome. How many of you are familiar with the book Horton Hears a Who? Is there anybody who doesn't know who Dr. Seuss is? Good. Just like Dr. Hora?
He doesn't know.
Oh, Jesus doesn't know. Jess. All right. He's a children's book writer, author of How the Grinch Stole Christmas, which has been on television and so forth. And he's actually, at least recently, he's quite a moral writer. His stories for children present very value-oriented stories. And Horton Hears a Who is certainly such a story. Horton is an elephant. Very kindly elephant, right? Now, Horton is taking a bath one day, and he hears a little voice. And he looks around, and he doesn't see anything or anybody except a speck of dust. Horton is also a very alert elephant, and so rather than just dismiss the sound, he assumes there must be, it seems to him that the voice is coming from the speck of dust. He says, there must be somebody on that speck of dust, a very small somebody, but somebody. So he tries to make contact, which he does. And the little voice says, I know I'm too small to be seen, but I'm mayor of a town that is friendly and clean. My town is called Whoville, for I am a Who, and we Whos are all thankful and grateful to you. Now, having discovered this whole town on this speck of dust, Horton takes it upon himself at great risk and great cost to himself to protect Whoville and the little Whos from disaster. And it takes him all over the place and through all kinds of traumas. But he does it because, as he says, after all, a person's a person, no matter how small. And that's the theme of the book, and that's the value. Now, another quote from another doctor, Dr. Hora. Most of us are convinced that we are products of our childhood experiences. But who is it who was having these experiences? The thinker and the doer interacting with other thinkers and doers? But there never was such an individual. And then from St. Paul in 2 Corinthians, this is from the Lamsa translation. That's a translation from Aramaic texts. And now from henceforth we do not know anyone in the body. Whoever from now on is a follower of Christ is a new creation. Old things have passed away. Now I thought it might be interesting, since we've spent a whole day immersed in the topic of being born again, to just take have a few moments at the beginning and see, first of all, at this point, how many of you think that you would like to be born again? I'll also volunteer for the children and a few other people I know. Huh? Okay, is there anybody who thinks you would not like to be born again? Okay. It's not. Right. Those of you who think that it's a desirable thing, what are your thoughts about it that make it seem desirable to you? What are some of your thoughts about what it involves or what it is that make it desirable? Roberta?
I thought it would mean freedom from all the ignorant thoughts that we collect.
Freedom.
Tim will say that.
Freedom to be a loving presence in the world, interact and manipulate.
A new level of conscious awareness.
Yeah, Alice?
I think for me, it means living in the land of PAGL.
That sounds desirable. Doyle?
And we're going to all be pushed into sooner or later, so I think it's better sooner.
Phyllis Knight.
Phyllis? Less troublesome. Okay, now those of you who indicated that it's not entirely desirable, like Faye, what are your thoughts about it, Faye, that make it seem maybe not so hot?
I could say yes and then I could no, but I had a horrible headache. So part of me is really saying no.
No way.
And I started listening to the tape last night, and I said I didn't hear his lecture yesterday at all. I mean, I wiped it out completely. So there's part of me that just is really the fear of letting go and finding out if there's if there's something on the other side.
So what you're doing is recognizing that although on one conscious level, you might say, oh, sure I do. You read all these signals of something else in your consciousness that is saying, oh. Yeah, right. Betty, what about you?
Well, I kept thinking how Dr. Hora said yesterday that all of us are bragging, or how we're mostly self-confirmatory, and I was thinking, I'm mostly self-confirmatory, and if I really wanted to be born again or understood it, if I wasn't interested in myself, I wouldn't still be bragging and being self-confirmatory. So it's whether I like it or not, it's kind of obvious I still like something.
So, actually, that's really true for all of us, isn't it? We do and we don't. We would like to be born again, very much. But there are still some some things that obtain in consciousness that are obstructing our wholehearted interest in it. Well, it occurred to me now, if we're going to think about being reborn, that it might be interesting to start with the first time around, the first birth. Because you see, if ye must be born again, there must be something the matter with the first birth. And so I looked up the word birth in the dictionary and found that the general meaning of it is the beginning of anything. The beginning of anything. And so I thought, well, now what is it that begins when a baby is born? When a human being is born, what begins? What would you say? Interaction. Friction.
Self-confirming ideation.
Self-confirming ideation. Janet. Fantasy. Oh, you're all too smart. Fern.
That has a life of their own. It's running this show.
Right. Jess. Physical appearance. Doyle.
They started calling people on earth father and mother.
A belief in material, personal parenthood and childhood, right? Okay, now it's interesting. There is nobody here who came up with the answer that our culture would give. What's the answer that our culture would give? Life, right. Life begins. Right. And that, you know how much difficulty there is in our culture right now because of identifying a baby as life. When is it life? When does the life start? So the point is that life is not born because life does not die. Life is non-corporeal, it's infinite, it's eternal, it is reality. So life doesn't start when a baby is born. A who begins. Birth is the beginning of a who, a very small little who. Somebody, right? And our culture, you see, desires to reverence life and to reverence individuality, but it mistakenly locates individuality and life in a hunk form, in a who form, and therefore ends up reverencing personhood, bodyhood, material existence, separateness, in its attempt to reverence life, because it incorrectly identifies what life is and where it is. So, human birth is the beginning of a who. And what is a who? Ego. And what is an ego? Right, it's a false sense of something. It's a mistaken consciousness, essentially. It's a mistaken belief. First of all, it's a mistaken belief about life. Life comes inside containers, right? And here's a little container of life, among other things. And the idea, I am what I contain. All of that is included in what being a who involves. So the first birth in human experience is a manifestation of a mental mistake, a universal mental mistake. It's the birth of a who, a body, an autonomous self, a thinker-doer. These are all terms that we use to point to this mistake. Well, what's the matter with being a who? In the book, Horton Here's a Who, whodom is the highest value. After all, says Horton, a person's a person, no matter how small. The highest value, and that reflects the values of our culture. So what's the matter with being a who?
Not in the ultimate sense, or in terms of reality.
It's not true.
It's precarious.
Yes, Elizabeth. Talk about that a little bit more.
Well, it could be lost.
And if life starts and life can end, and it's just real dangerous.
Precarious is a very good word. Think of those little who's on that speck of dust, dependent for their very survival upon the chance benevolence of a kindly elephant. What could be more precarious? And of course, that's exactly the way that's the way we see ourselves. We're on this little ball spinning in space, and we hope there's a big who out there somewhere, a big kindly benevolent presence who's going to keep us, because it's all up for grabs. Very precarious. Yes.
To be a who is to be a bucket, and therefore finite. And all that stuff that we know, stuff can fit in us than we can contain. I think any of us would figure that out by a couple of years old. And you're not really getting any of it unless you become a funnel.
The bucket overflows. Right. Right. Yes, Laura. Can you speak up, Laura?
Everything that we have comes from either our parents or from our environment or from our culture or from God is really our own for this particular people.
That's a very good spelling out of Jess's comment that is not true. See, we mistake where individuality lies, and in so doing, we end up serving the sea of mental garbage, the values of parents, the values of culture, all of those things which are the ways the sea of mental garbage comes into consciousness. That's right. That's not where real life lies, and it's not where real identity lies. And of course, obviously, that's somewhat troublesome if it has nothing to do with real life. Now, both Jesus and Paul indicate that the trouble with being a who is that it leaves God out of the picture. And since God is reality, that's a fairly serious thing to do, to leave God or reality out of the picture. Quite an omission. Yes, that's right. Jesus said, if a man is not born again, he cannot see the kingdom of God. He cannot see it. And the kingdom of God is reality. That which is born of flesh is flesh, and sees flesh, we could say. And that which is born of spirit is spirit, and sees spirit. Now, Paul says, for the material man rejects spiritual things. They are foolishness to him. Neither can he know them because they are spiritually discerned. They're foolishness. He hears what we're talking about and says, oh, that's so abstract, or you got to be real. Yeah, but you got to be realistic. Or it's foolishness to personhood, to whodom, the spiritual things. So that's the trouble with being a who. The trouble with being a who down in Whoville is that belief that life comes in containers, and that my identity is what I contain, and my life is what I contain, that cuts us off from God. And if we're cut off from God, we're not living real life, and we are not tuned into, we're not available to the resources that we need for healthy, beautiful, wholesome living. We're cut off from the resources that bloom our lives. So in this world, Jesus said, we could say in Whoville, ye have tribulation. That's just the way it is. And the picture of this little speck of dust is a very humorous, but actually very accurate picture of the tribulation that belongs to being a who. So the me, who is this me who needs to be reborn again? The me is nothing other than a mistake in consciousness that needs to be corrected. Now, see, I think mostly when people think of being born again, and certainly what the religious sense of it is of a person being changed into a much happier, freer, better, healthier person. I'll still be me, but boy, I'll be free and healthy and happy and joyful and peaceful all the time, and it's going to be wonderful. But, see, the reason we're getting headaches all that kind of thing is that being born again means that the mistaken consciousness is corrected. It means correcting the mistake in consciousness. And that doesn't produce another person. That produces, as we use the image, the funnel. That is a re-identification, not with entityness, being something, but with being an awareness. Just being an awareness. See, we're not really persons, we are awarenesses. Now, we spent most of our time in Hawaii really considering this issue of identifying not with whatever happens to be in consciousness, the thoughts that obtain there, but identifying with awareness itself. So, once the mistake is born or appears, believing ourselves to be whose, that is being born into this universal mental mistake, we suffer from a chronic mental process in consciousness that confirms and keeps fueling and keeps feeding the identity as a who. There's a certain mistake that we make in consciousness, and I mentioned it in Hawaii, and I called it the fall of man, the fall in consciousness there. Do any of you remember what that mistake is? What is the mistake that an awareness makes that turns it into a who? Again and again and again and again. Roberta?
That what we see is what is, and what we know is what it is.
The duck.
Right, the duck. Yes. I use the example of the duck or whatever it is that supposedly whatever it first sees when it comes out of the egg says, that's my mother, so that's what I am. See, consciousness says, because I am aware of these thoughts, I must be that person in that situation. Now that's the mistake. Because I am aware of certain thoughts obtaining, that must be me, and that must be my situation, that must be my life, that must be reality, that must be what's going on. That's what keeps us being who's down in Whoville. Now, an example. Sometimes one of our boys will come tearfully confront me with such words as, you always let so-and-so do such and such, and you never let me. Now, as I commented in Hawaii, I'm often astonished at that knowledge. See, that's what he knows is going on. I don't know that. Well, what is going on is that becoming aware of certain thoughts in consciousness, he assumes that's who he is and that's what's happening to him. Now, when I hear those thoughts presented to me in that way, certain thoughts are triggered off in my consciousness relating to who I think I am. See, who is he? He's a poor, unjustly treated boy. And who am I? I am a very good mother. Who never unjustly treats her children, but is not sufficiently appreciated by them. So, what happens? Two who's, right? Two who's in conflict. Now, if he believes what he's thinking and I believe what I'm thinking, we have a great big drama going. And the drama confirms to each of us who we are. Because I will react and I will lecture him and I will, out of my own sense of who I am, I'll tell him how unappreciative he is and so forth and so on, which will make him feel even less understood and so forth, which will make me feel even less appreciated. And that's the way hoodoo builds and goes and gets bigger and bigger. And we feel our feelings more and more strongly and believe it more and more strongly, and the whole thing gets more and more real to us. And that's what happens when, becoming aware of certain thoughts, we assume, well, I must be that person in that situation. That's who we are from the first birth. Who's constantly in friction, constantly with either conflict or agreement But there we have the hunks, the entities of Hoodum. But suppose that at that moment I am more interested in being born again than in being who I was born the first time around. Just suppose that. Then, instead of just blindly abandoning myself to whatever happens to come into my consciousness from the sea of mental garbage, and then becoming the puppet of these thoughts, whatever thoughts are there, I become the puppet of, and I'm hollering and screaming and so forth. So instead of doing that, I may pause for a moment, endeavoring to see the situation not in terms of the thoughts obtaining in my consciousness or the thoughts obtaining in his consciousness, but in terms of God's reality. What does God know? See, only God knows what's really going on here. And what does God know? Well, I may say to myself at that point, just because I am aware of these thoughts does not mean I am that person in that situation. And just because he is aware of those thoughts does not mean that he is that person in that situation. And if I am able to do that, then I'm free. I'm free from the hypnotic, captivating grip of Hoodum, of the drama of being a who. And when that happens, then there is place in my awareness for awareness of what really is to take place. I'm open to inspired wisdom. The whole big thing just fizzles out. Lao Tzu says, he who feels punctured must have been a bubble. You know, the big bubbles that Hoodum creates, they go and they fizzle away. Now, every time, in that moment, when the Hoodum disappears, dissolves, and reality obtains, inspired wisdom is present, I'm born again. I'm born again. I'm not a born-again person. I'm no person at all for that moment. I'm simply an awareness that has lost its identification with the sea of mental garbage. So, being born again, although we read a great deal and hear a great deal about wonderful, wonderful moments of complete realization or very big realizations, actually being born again is correcting the mental mistake. And for most of us, that means doing it over and over again, or as we say, moment by moment. Now, in Hawaii, Phyllis mentioned that for the first time, she had a real understanding of what this phrase moment by moment means. She said, it means as it comes up. So as our Hoodum comes up, like it would in such a situation, there it is. As it comes up, it is corrected, and it is released, and it dissolves. So what I am, when I am born again, is what I really have always been, but just didn't notice, an awareness. And where am I before I'm born again? Where do I live? What would you say? Where are we before we are born again in the sense that we're talking about? Where does a who live? In its container? Fantasies?
It's mine.
Mine? Right. I live in the world of what I misconstrue to be my thoughts and my values and my feelings. And where are we? Where do we live when we are born again? Right. We live in the world of God's thoughts and God's values, or spiritual values. We live in the world of spiritual values. Now, this moment by moment, or as it comes up, kind of correction may seem a tall order to some of us, or to all of us at some times. I think most people prefer to have this fantasy of I'll sort of plug along and one day, pow, and I'll see it all and no more struggle, and But when it comes to, what about when you're at the height of your sense of who you are? What about that moment then? Turning away from that. It's tough sometimes, isn't it? That may seem like a really tall order. In fact, many students will say, you know, this all sounds so wonderful. Spiritual reality is just beautiful and the values are wonderful. But when I'm really caught up in feelings and interaction, I just can't get in touch with it. It just doesn't seem real. The only thing that seems real is how I feel and what's going on. Well, you see, that's actually true. See, both Jesus and Paul said it straight out. You cannot see the kingdom of God as a who. Who's do not see other than the interactions of whoville. But a who uses his or her blindness as an excuse for staying blind. And we don't have to do that. We can be interested in seeing, even though to be enlightened, to be healthy, to be born again, it is only very difficult to be really interested. And it's very good that some of you already could see that in spite of your wanting to be interested, there are lots of signs that you're not really interested. Because if we're all wrapped up in defending, no, I am interested. I'm really interested. You know? Then we're stuck. But if we can see the areas, see the obstacles to being interested, that's already a help. Now, we only really need to be more interested in being born again or living in God's reality than in living in whoville. But we need to be interested precisely at the moments when we are most captivated by the hypnotism. Now, what does it take? What does it take for an individual to become that interested? Suffering? Or wisdom? Alertness. Well, alertness is actually what we become when we become interested. When we're really interested, then we're very alert to what's going on. Marjorie?
Well, I was thinking that it's like you say, I refuse to be caught in this, and I would like to see, something better. You have to almost, become just aware of how wrapped up you are in the resentment or the anger, the hurt or whatever it might be. And if I find now that if I say I refuse to be caught up in this, then it kind of shifts me back to, well, what would be better? And I start trying to work with something of, seeing quality or understanding love intelligence.
Laura and then Tim.
I'm not always so successful, but I did catch myself getting involved last night in a screaming match, and I realized what I was doing, and I think this is help Laura. It's not helpful. And although I didn't know what to do, I did gain an inspired vision. I did just stop, just sit and walk in and eat them. So I just let myself be involved.
That's certainly a step beyond just going on with it. It's a big step. Yeah, Tim? Dedication and desperation.
When you come to the point that there's got to be something more, is that still where
We said suffering, all these things I could really identify with, but there's got to be something added on to that.
Yeah, right. There's suffering combined, you're saying, with some sense that there is something better. Otherwise, people just kill themselves or kill somebody else or whatever. Janine?
radical sincerity was, you clean the root of it out. Really wanting that, root of that,
Radical sincerity, yes. Okay, actually, Dr. Hora talks a lot about radical sincerity, meaning that we have to be honest with ourselves about where our interests really lie and so forth. The formula, of course, is what we talked about yesterday about we are either driven or drawn by suffering or by wisdom. Now, I think perhaps we all start out driven, but actually, I don't want to talk much about that. You know, we're all very familiar with being desperate, and actually being clobbered into the kingdom of heaven is no great deal. Actually, even it doesn't work ultimately. See, ultimately we can't be born again because that's still a very self-centered motivation. All right, God, all right, I'll accept a little goodness because the pain is so great, but that's still very what's in it for this who kind of thing. But there is another motivation, and I think the motivation that is the only motivation that will do it, that is, that will lead us to the point of that kind of interest, is for love of love. And that's something that we can start out in the suffering, but as we immerse ourselves in spiritual study, as we expose our consciousness to concepts of spiritual values, our appetites begin to change and what we cherish begins to change. Isn't it a shame, really, that God is love and nobody notices? Extraordinary. Here we are all down here carrying on as if God were not love. And as you begin to get a sense of the absolute loveliness of love and the beauty of holiness, that there's no other beauty than the beauty of the wholeness of life and the health, you begin to be drawn. Who would not want to cherish these lovely things? Who would not want to cherish them? And who would not long to know them? And we do, because we are spiritual beings. When we were in Hawaii, Father Terrell was asked a question by Dr. Hora about free will, and he shared with our group a very beautiful image out of Catholic mystical theology, which is, he says, according to Catholic doctrine, we have free will up until the point where we attain the vision of God. And at that point, free will just doesn't exist anymore, because nobody could desire anything but God once they have seen God. Now that's a theological statement for the fact that there is nothing more beautiful and than the beauty that belongs to spiritual reality, and that because we are spiritual beings, because we have this faculty that Dr. Hora keeps referring to, the faculty of spiritual discernment, deep in every human being, human consciousness, is the hunger to come home to the perfection of spiritual reality. So the love of love is the real motivation that ushers us into the kingdom of heaven. Now, there's another aspect of this love, and that we might call a love for mankind. Now, as we know in metapsychiatry, we're not here for ourselves, and we're not here for other selves either. But we come to see that somehow we are involved in the human condition with all other humans. And I think it needs to be seen that actually the issue of being born again is not an individual issue at all. That's an illusion. It's a universal issue. The physicist David Bohm makes the following comment. He has more and more in recent works addressed issues of consciousness in his physics, and he says this. He says, problems originate in the consciousness of mankind and manifest in the individual. You see, each individual manifests the consciousness of mankind, which is what we call the sea of mental garbage. So, see, what we were beginning to discover yesterday is that our problems, our fantasies, all of this stuff, this isn't ours. That's not where our individuality lies. We're just, at that point, places where the sea of mental garbage manifests itself. The consciousness that springs from the mistaken view of life as being in hunks. And that mistaken view gives rise infinitely, endlessly to thoughts, feelings, all that mental sea of all the stuff that comes out of the mistake of judging by appearances. That's what our human lives manifest. And the interviewer then asks Professor Bohm, wouldn't it seem to follow that it's no longer a question of what the ancients called finding my own salvation, but much more responsibility toward the rest of mankind? And Professor Bohm replies, individual salvation actually has very little meaning, because, as I've pointed out, the consciousness of mankind is one and not truly divisible. Each person has a kind of responsibility, not, however, in the sense of answerability or guilt, but in the sense that there's nothing else to do, really, you see, that there is no other way out. That is absolutely what has to be done, and nothing else can work. Now, what absolutely has to be done is what he calls psychological atom smashing, and it's what we're talking about as being born again. See, we are awarenesses, and we manifest in the form of our life experiences and the quality of our presence that of which we are aware. And when we cherish whodom in consciousness, our sense of self, we are not really cherishing life or individuality. We're just cherishing and actually potentiating the sea of mental garbage, which is the source of all the suffering of mankind. When you may not see, or we're not used to thinking that there's a connection between, say, our fight with our spouse or our kids and, say, the problem of world hunger. But there is a connection. There is a connection. There's all problems are simply manifestations of the same mistaken understanding of life, and it makes no sense to try to solve problems, through righteous social causes out there, if we are at the same time cherishing in consciousness the view of life that is giving rise to those problems. We're just working against ourselves. We must be born again. There is simply no other way, individually or collectively, to life. The mistake in consciousness must be corrected. Now, Dr. Hora writes in his paper that came out of the speech at University of California at Irvine last year, the process of spiritual understanding could be compared to climbing out of a valley. Remember, Jan quoted a little bit of this yesterday. In the valley, things appear to be plain, just as they seem to be. Everything makes sense. Then as we begin climbing out of the valley, things begin to appear in a different light. With every step upward, new vistas are opening up, and things reveal themselves as not at all what we thought them to be in the valley. As we rise out of the valley, higher and higher, we begin to see man not in parts, but as a totality, an integrated whole, a functioning manifestation of love intelligence. Then we are in love and in intelligence. In the valley, people think that love is an emotion and intelligence is intellectual. But as we rise out of the valley, we see that love and intelligence are something else. They are not intrapsychic processes. They are not in man. Man is in them. Love and intelligence do not come from inside of us. We live and move and have our being in love intelligence. We do not produce intelligence. Intelligence and love govern us. So we are not whos. We are not hunks of life trying to exist with millions of other hunks, and all of us wafted randomly on a speck of dust, dependent on a kindly elephant for our survival. We are places. We are places where this reality in which we live and move manifests itself by way of our being aware of it. Now, in Zen Buddhism, there's a lovely concept which was brought up by Dr. Hora in Hawaii, the concept of the bodhisattva. Is there anybody here who doesn't know what the bodhisattva? Okay. That's the idea in Zen Buddhism of the individual whose own consciousness has become so completely enlightened, so it's completely free, that individual would not himself have any reason or need to go through the human process of rebirth again. And yet, for love of the ignorant, suffering consciousnesses left, that individual stays on this level of existence and stays here free from the suffering, him or herself, but as what we call a beneficial presence, as someone whose presence and whose clarity of consciousness blesses and heals all those who come in contact with him or her. Now, what a crowning fulfillment of human life, to be here glowing with God, glowing for God, but radiating the divine energies into the world of sorrow. All aspirations, all human aspirations really come together at that peak to be born again for the love of love. Is it possible to be born again? Well, Jesus said it's even necessary, so it must be possible. It is possible to those who are mindful of the first principle of metapsychiatry. Thou shalt have no other interest before the good of God, which is spiritual. Or as the Bible puts it, blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. We'll take just a few minutes for the camera to be readjusted before we go on with our discussion. Or maybe, is it time for a break yet? I guess it is. No.
Spoke briefly about the world problem, and it seems to me that if we are to solve the world's problems, then the whole universe has to, the human race has to change its thinking. So it's going to take forever to solve these problems. It seems to me we still have to try to solve them in our human way, even if everybody isn't in the same trade. What do you, how do you respond to that?
Well, first of all, there is a concept, and it's both biblical and it's also in Professor Bohm's thinking now, and that is, you know, in the Old Testament, it talks about the Lord saving the city for, 10 righteous men, or the prayers of 5 righteous men, or in one case, I believe, even 1 wise man. Apparently, you see, if we all either contribute to or purify world consciousness, the effect of purity of consciousness can be rather beyond simply one individual.
Like throwing a pebble in a pond.
Yes, the Professor Bohm actually thinks that if a certain community of like-minded people who could go through this process of what he called atom smashing, that is, become funnel consciousnesses, could radically influence. And the TM people, they believe very much that meditating, particularly in groups, refines the consciousness. And so there is a good deal of I think any of us who have had moments of radical sincerity and discovered the incredible powerfulness of omni-action have gotten a glimpse of the fact that we just don't expect enough to let this incredible, reality is so powerful. It's so much what is that you can't, in other words, all I'm saying is you can't say there are 2 million people would have to refine their consciousness. You can only say, at least what I'm saying is, the very most that I can do to contribute is in consciousness to both cease potentiating ignorance and also to become a place where this incredible force of omniactive love intelligence finds expression and manifestation in the world. Now, I'm not saying nobody should work on any causes. I'm simply pointing to the fact that if you work on causes in a self-confirmatory way, you're not doing anybody any good, and it's really hypocritical. Jan?
I'd like to add to that. You see, that the question that you raised that way is really a question from a personal viewpoint. Persons see many other persons.
Right.
And for a person, it's not possible. The person sees an enormous mountain. And it's true. It cannot be solved from that point of view. It is the wrong point of view. So we need to radically commit ourselves to address that point of view. And refuse to think along those lines and try to see it from another point of view.
Well, could you elaborate a little bit on that?
I refer to the lecture just before.
Yeah.
So in other words, that is what Anne was trying to say. From a personal viewpoint, our problems, suppose we are faced with a serious illness. That cannot be solved from a personal viewpoint. We cannot do that. The world problem's the same. If we look at it from what we can do very little. It's a very frustrating thing. But if we study the ideas of the divine love, intelligence, presence, and that perspective, then something entirely different becomes possible that a person cannot even conceive of.
Can you speak a moment about Gandhi and your own reaction to Gandhi life?
Gandhi.
Yeah.
What about him? He's a nice fellow.
Yeah, but more beyond that,
Beyond what?
do you feel that he was in his own supposed nonviolent approach to life,
Yeah.
living more of this kind of life?
No, I don't think so.
You don't think?
No, I said it's a very, very high degree religious man with a great social consciousness, but ultimately he serves the cause of violence by being non-violent. It's a form of violence. If you want to read more about that, the book Existential Metapsychiatry has a chapter, The Healing of Violence. Speaks of Gandhi. And Martin Luther King and various people that preach the social cause. But the solution doesn't lie there. Even though these people have attained very high degrees of human values and religious values, but as you know, they are not yet ascended to spiritual values. Such values, even though they are very remarkable, are not spiritual values. Yes, Shirley.
Are you saying that if there are enough beneficial presences or even few together,
Yes.
can they see what really is for the universe
Yeah, they can see that.
and do good? I mean,
See, actually, that was my response, and Jan's comment made me aware of the fact that I got a little bit hooked by the question. See, the real issue is what is real. Not, how can I manage the unreality best, or how many people does it take to manage the unreality? The real question for each individual is, what is real? And if I simply concern myself with radically, sincerely, honestly pursuing that understanding, then that's what life is all about. And when to try to, my response about so many people will burn off so much kind of thing, and people are talking about this kind of thing, but that's really a false issue that we get off intellectually. That's an intellectual issue. The issue for each individual's own life is, what is true? what is real.
Yes.
Well, you need to realize that in your own experience, and that will lead you wherever you need to go, and that will do whatever needs to be done, and so forth. Roberta.
Jane?
Oh,
Yeah, I
Denise.
just, I'm going to
That mic is dangerous.
reminded of Burbank, whatever.
Luther Burbank.
In having consciousness, I don't know if he went around bragging or consciousness was, but when it was at the earthquake or something happened and nothing around was destroying it, his the
Yes.
flowers or anything, the consciousness level.
Well, would you tell the story? You want me to tell the story? No, actually not. I read it in the book
Oh, you
of...
read it, okay.
You'll
Yeah,
get
but
learned.
it just came to my mind about man's consciousness, nothing around him was disturbed, the flowers and everything. Was it
But now you
earthquake?
make everybody curious.
I don't remember the fact, but it just...
Yeah. But bring up the mic to Roberta then. This is a well-known story that is reported in the book, a lovely book that some of you may be familiar with. What's the name of it?
What autobiography of a yogi?
Yeah, the autobiography of a yogi by Yogananda, where he tells about a dear friend, Luther Burbank, an horticulturist, after which the city of Burbank is named, by the way, who in the early 1900s had many greenhouses around that area of Burbank, I think. A very lovely man and a high developed consciousness. Well, the story goes that with the earthquake of 19-something, 33, right?
No,
Earlier?
Yeah, well,
One of those earthquakes.
that even though vast areas around his place were destroyed and buildings were destroyed, that even his greenhouses were intact. How you know how fragile a greenhouse is? When you live in a greenhouse. And the story goes that the Burbank's place was completely intact, which this yogi contributes to his state of consciousness.
Isn't that a beautiful demonstration of the 91st Psalm?
I can hear you.
Isn't that a beautiful demonstration of the 91st Psalm?
How does it demonstrate the 91st Psalm? What does the 91st Psalm say?
No plague shall come nigh thy dwelling.
What?
Secret place of the Most High.
Right.
Shall abide under the rock.
Right. Because thou hast made the Lord, even the Most High, which is my refuge, thine habitation, no evil can come near thy dwelling, neither can come any plague near your tent. Right? That's right. Roberta?
I have two thoughts and questions. The first is about born again. It seems that you need to say born again, again, again. But the first question is, when I have a realization, you're saying that I have been born again. So having had a realization, I have at one time been born again. Is that correct?
Yes, at the moment of the realization that your personhood is dissolved and you are an awareness aware of spiritual reality.
And having had that, that makes it easier. The again, the second.
Yes.
Okay.
Sure.
The other thing that you just said, and I'm still not clear about, I'm not aware, I am awareness. What do I need to be awareness? See, to be aware, it's more understandable to me. I could say, I could apply the principle, I could shift my thoughts, but I don't know what I need to know to be awareness.
Well, see, if you say, I am aware, you presuppose an I. And who is the I who is always presupposed if we use I as who? That's who I am. I'm that person who at this moment happens to be aware of something. When we say, I am awareness, what we're saying is that there is simply awareness aware, here is an individual awareness. And it is no entity.
It is the awareness without the person.
Right.
To say I am aware is something you do almost. And if you say I am awareness in your being, there's nothing to do, or nobody doing. You say I am aware sounds like something you do.
Well, yeah, actually, it occurred to me when we talked about knowledge that you can say I know, which is a doing, but you can't say I aware. So awareness is a state, but to say I am awareness is even taking the state and making it an identity, actually. The whole problem is what we think, what we identify with. We identify with stuff that's in our heads. And we think that because it's in our heads, it is not only ours, it is us. What is that Pogo used to say? We has met the enemy and they is us, or something like that.
Phyllis.
Phyllis.
Yeah.
I want to mention the quality of attention that everybody learns in life, and also the idea that we do not know, because that leads through for something new to come in, new thing that we talked about, and to realize that it will very likely be of a completely different nature than anything that we have known up to this point. It brings up being the seeker. So it's seeing that attention, seeing the seeker, being aware that we do not know, and to be open to something new is very helpful.
Thank you, Philip. And then Maureen.
It occurred to me, Annie, and you were, and what Phyllis said too, that it's so simple to be awareness or to be enlightened or born again, but our interest is so much in another side. And it occurred to me when I was thinking,